Welcome to Lore of the Ring, where I describe wrestling lore to my co-host. I'm Dan.
I'm Daphne.
And today we're going to have Daphne watch her first match. Again, as always, I do have to shout out Queer Kaiju for making our opening theme. And Daphne, are you excited about watching your first match?
I'm actually super excited. Yeah, it's because like I've seen bits and pieces of it on TV as I've been flipping channels before, and stuff, but I've never like sat down and watched a whole match from beginning to end. So I'm looking forward to this. I think it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I do want to give some background on this match just because I think it's the perfect match to start at, because it both represents not only the beginning of a very like centric wrestler's career, but it also introduced a veteran cast member, and also represents the beginning of an era of wrestling as well. So I want to kind of like talk about a little bit of those first. So the era in particular that wrestling is like most long-running things like Godzilla and other things we like are split up into a bunch of different eras that all have like specialized different like styles and stuff like that and are very different.
Okay.
So like there's the Golden Era, which is the one that everyone knows has the Hulk Hogan's, Andre the Giant's, Macho Man Randy Savage's. After that, when either most of those people had left or were getting older and about to retire, we had the New Generation Era, which can be best described as as them learning all the wrong lessons from the Golden Era.
Okay.
Because it's usually called not good. But most of their good stars bled through to what's called the Attitude Era, which is the era from the wrestlers that you've told me you're familiar with, is the era that you kind of grew up in. That's where The Rock, Stone Cold, Mankind, Big Show, like all like those big names from that era are from that era in particular. This one was this is quite literally earlier in the week of this debut match that we're going to watch. Vince McMahon said that it's the beginning of a new era, and this era is the era I grew up in, called the Ruthless Aggression Era.
Oh my god.
Where he wanted to prioritize it being unhinged. So...
I mean, he's made some great strides toward that already with the stories I've been hearing.
Yeah.
Oh god.
So like the Attitude Era was always like very raunchy and in your face, but Ruthless Aggression was very much geared towards you're going to watch people bleed and bleed a lot.
God. Okay, so it just got even edgier.
Yeah, with it kind of dialed back like some of the like the verbal edginess, and it got more to like the physical end of edginess.
Okay.
And the wrestler, the veteran cast member that I do want to mention, who has we've talked about him before very briefly, is Kurt Angle.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that name at all? Because he's from the Attitude Era, so you might know a little bit about him.
I do know that name, actually, yeah. I'm trying to remember what I know about him. I don't remember much.
So, like Mark Henry, he's an Olympic athlete. He's actually an Olympic gold medalist. And unlike Mark Henry, who competed in the weightlifting class, Kurt actually competed in wrestling, and he won his gold medal with a broken neck.
Gee, what?
So,
how?
The more technical thing is that there were like, I don't remember the exact number, but there's like 7 platelets fractured in his neck, which doctors would call a broken neck. Only assisted by by pain medicine injected directly into that part, he went on to win that gold medal.
Jeez Louise. Alright, wow. Well, that's a hell of a lot of cred to bring to wrestling right off the bat.
Yeah, when he first started, he wasn't sure about professional wrestling, and he was scared off for a bit, because the first time he went to a professional wrestling show was at an ECW show, which was Extreme Championship Wrestling, notable for being even edgier than WWE was at the time. they brought him in because he had a mutual friend that he knew one of the ECW wrestlers through, and they reached out through them and described it in a way like, oh, it's kind of more similar to amateur wrestling, which it wasn't. But they had like kind of a match with one of their more technical guys and had him commentate it. And he was like, yeah, that was pretty good. Like, I'm sure they wanted to get him as part of the show. But then later in the show, the wrestler Sandman, who is ECW champion, was crucified with a barbed wire crown of thorns.
Okay.
So,
pretty normal. Yeah.
So he demanded that his part be removed from the show because he was like, this is going to kill my career.
I think it's a pretty reasonable concern, all things considered.
Yeah. He eventually did come to WWE, but, like, even though he's, like, a literal wrestling machine in how he's able to perform and stuff, he was usually cast as the bad guy, I guess because being an Olympic athlete is some form of being, like, establishment, so he was normally, like, aligned with Vince McMahon in some way.
Okay.
And he was normally also, like, kind of treated as, like, very, like, goody-goody as comparison, even though he was kind of cheated sometimes and was, like, generally an asshole. Like, comparatively, he was less harder edge. Like, for instance, you may have seen the clip once of Stone Cold spraying down people in the ring with a hose connected to a beer truck. It's like spraying down everyone with beer. Angle did the same thing, but with a milk truck. So...
What? I mean, that's just good environmental storytelling right there. Is what comes out of the truck you spray people with. It says so much about your character.
God. So this is right after it's immediately after the pay-per-view where he beat Hulk Hogan, causing Hogan to submit and tap out. But it's also shortly after the hair versus hair match between him and former Vampire Edge, in which he got his head shaved at the end of it.
Yeah, that's how I remember that's how I read about how hair matches work. Forever ago, for unrelated reasons.
Yeah, it's kind of taken partially that concept from something from Lucha. Because they have a thing called a mask versus mask match.
Yeah.
And the mask represents a lot more than just, like, being like a stylistic thing in lucha wrestling, so...
Yeah, no, I read up on... Going into this, I knew a little more about lucha wrestling just because I had a little bit more of an idea of the cultural impact of it and the culture of, like, the masks and the characters, and I mean, not even characters, the identities that the masks kind of represented and were. So yeah, no, actually I had read up a little bit on that. I knew a little bit about these concepts from that album I told you about last episode. So that's one place where I had a little bit of some knowledge coming into this.
Yeah, and I do really love that album. Before the end of the episode, I am going to circle back to that album because there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about with it.
Hell yes.
I'm trying to think of anything else to bring up beforehand. Just related to the hair versus hair match. That was actually their second attempt at that. Because prior to that, they wanted to do Edge in a different hair versus hair match, but with him against Booker T. But neither of them wanted to shave their heads, both because part of Edge's identity is having really long blonde hair, and Booker T was just getting his dreads starting to grow the way he wanted it to.
Oh god, yeah, you don't want to mess with dreads that much.
Yeah, because the initial storyline is that they both auditioned for parts in a Japanese shampoo commercial. And that was supposed to be like, oh, the loser would shave their head. But neither of them wanted to do it, so it just became the winner of the match got to be in the commercial. As, like, just an excuse to have them fight, because they're both, like, just good wrestlers.
Makes sense.
The match is completely undercut by someone in the front row holding up a sign that says they're fighting over shampoo.
Yeah, you can't really call attention to the more realistic aspects of it, or it kind of takes you out of it. That's really.
And this was at WrestleMania. This was their WrestleMania moment.
God, that's so good.
So, we're gonna stop recording now, so we can watch the match. And then when we come back, Daphne will talk about her thoughts on it and everything like that. And if you do want to watch along, it's uploaded on YouTube as a debuting John Cena accepts Kurt Angle's Open Challenge, Smackdown, June 27th, 2002. I'm going to send y'all into a short ad break.
Heck yes.
Did you know our podcast is also available over on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public? All great ways to listen to Lore of the Ring on the go. Those uploads are also sponsored, so listening over there is a great way to support the show as well. Links are in the description. And we are back. Daphne, what did you think of the match?
That was a lot of fun. Going into this, we've talked enough about this that I was aware that pro wrestling gets dismissed a lot when there's actually a lot going on behind the scenes with the way that it's written, with the way that the fights are designed, and with the way that the different moves are like sold and shown off and stuff. But this is a really good illustration of of all those different elements coming together. Like, I don't know, I took notes here and there as I was watching, but I was also just like, this is really cool. And trying to keep track of, like, it was just cool seeing all the different stuff we've talked about and the conclusions I've kind of drawn as I've learned about this, all like encapsulated in one match. I had a lot of fun. This was really fun to watch.
Were there any moments that really, like, stuck out to you, or?
There were a few, actually, yeah. I think the moment that stuck out the most, there were a few that I really liked, but the thing that stuck out the most was when Cena is down and he's gradually, like, forcing himself up off the ground with, like, the crowd chanting his name and stuff. That's the moment where, whether he had won that match or not, like, that already had effectively established, like, yeah, people are going to root for this guy. People like this guy. And it's interesting. Like, they set that up so well with the way that they have Angle posturing as, like, the jock, basically, who's just the establishment guy that, like, is kind of cocky and thinks of himself as a poster child and stuff. And Cena comes in and kind of blows past all that really quickly. It's very effectively done to establish him in 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes, I think. That was extremely effective, honestly.
Yeah, it's really one of my favorite, like, matches. It's also a very funny thing in that episode that Batista actually debuts the same episode, and those were the two that kind of, like, outlined this whole era of wrestling.
Yeah, and then they're the two that went on to get a lot of, like, start to get, now I'm seeing the end result of that, which is they get, like, mainstream acting roles and stuff. And it's weird seeing that continue where these pro wrestlers eventually move on to establish, like, acting careers, kind of like The Rock did before them.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that was really fun. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just wondering, like, any, like, specific, like, character things that you really liked, or anything, like, that you were able to, like, pick up specifically from Angle, or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. There's a lot here to establish, even for if I didn't have any of the background about Kurt Angle that you'd given me, the way that he's introduced, first of all, even if I'd never heard of this guy before in my life, Vince McMahon introducing someone as, like, his friend or his best friend is instantly going to be like, I don't think I'm going to like whoever this is. Because Vince comes out and the crowd is already booing for Vince McMahon. And then Vince McMahon starts describing someone to the crowd who they already know and are already also booing. And then he comes out and they're chanting "You suck" in time to his entrance music. Like, holy crap. It's very over the top and it's very blatant, but it really works. if I'd come into this knowing nothing about Kurt Angle, it already establishes him as, win or lose, the antagonist or the bad guy of this match. In a very effective and a relatively short period of time. His posturing and his speech and stuff, really, you don't need that to establish him as a character, but it establishes a lot about John Cena because it sets him up to ignore all that and just start fighting him right away. So it really comes together well, all these disparate elements of, I guess, the writing of this thing.
Yeah. My favorite thing that I haven't really gotten to talk about, because it's kind of impossible to talk about until you see it happen, is how much, like, crowd interaction there is with the show.
Yeah.
Like, what did you notice from that specifically?
Well, whoever was filming made a point to show off all the signs people were holding up saying that Kurt Angle sucked, as he was talking about how great he was and how he was the poster child of this era of wrestling. That was very effective. The crowd actually chanting John Cena's last name as he's getting up and breaking out of and reversing that move was really, really fun. There was a lot more. And then just, like, Angle literally is just insulting the crowd at one point. And, like, I was aware intellectually that was a thing that you do in wrestling, and that's a thing that I've seen happen in, like, you know, fictionalized wrestling in cartoons and stuff, or just portrayals of wrestling in other fictional mediums, but it does a lot to establish, like, who you are expected to root for and who you are expected to root against when a match starts.
Yeah, and, like, there's also something in wrestling that's called a pop, which is when the crowd just basically immediately gets on their feet and starts screaming, and I just noticed how loud they did it for, like, each of Cena's, like, big spots in the match. Other thing about the crowd specifically at that event, which is just one of the funniest things to me when I was watching this match back a while ago, when Angle's walking back down to the ring at the end, one of the audience members, like, flashes the camera.
I completely missed that.
I'm gonna rewind it a bit in the watch together room.
Oh no.
It's very funny to me.
I guess I'm not surprised. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that would be a thing that would happen. Oh, yeah, no, there it is.
It's very funny to me.
She saw her moment and she went for it. God.
Oh, God. So I know you know how Cena's career has went, like, now. What do you think, like, the immediate follow-up to that was?
Well, if I had to guess from this, I feel like if it were me, there were a couple different ways I could see this going. The fact that his first match is against someone as big and as, you know, major as Kurt Angle is, I feel like you can either go the route of he starts challenging all the other big names and he just goes for all the top people right off the bat, or or after this, I don't know if he does smaller matches and stuff to kind of build back up and work his way back up to fighting Angle again. I'm not sure which way you'd want to go with that, because they both... I guess what it depends on is whether or not they're trying to set up, like, an arc where there's, like, a full-on rivalry with Angle, where he wants to get back to fight him again to kind of prove himself, and he just is dealing with getting everybody else out of the way to get back to Angle, or if he's just, like, he's established himself and he doesn't need to worry about that anymore. Because Angle blowing off the handshake at the end, considering a second round and then just bouncing instead, that sets up, like, a rival, and that sets up, like, a story arc if you want to go that route. So I am not sure, because I think they're both really effective, is either he goes right for Angle again right away, or he ignores Angle and works on his own stuff, or he tries to build back up to getting back to fighting Angle again. I think all of those are equally viable for Cena with the setup that they've given him here.
Yeah, so Immediately what they do after this match, because after this match it went to commercial break on the actual show, they show him backstage getting props from a bunch of the more established wrestlers. And Undertaker, who was WWE champion at the time and was actually in a bigger feud with Kurt Angle at the time, comes over and congratulates him. But then
that's good.
Yeah, and then the following week, Vince is like impressed with Cena a little bit and talks to him. But then another wrestler we brought up a few times named Chris Jericho, who again is another veteran, has been around for a long time. There's not really anything without showing you a match of like showing you how he like good he was, but the best like offhanded thing I can say is that he was the first undisputed champion in WWE, meaning he held the WWE title and the WCW title at the same time.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
So even though he had kind of slipped down the card a little bit comparatively to Angle, he was still like a bigger name. Jericho wasn't impressed with Cena, so they have a match later that night, but Jericho has to cheat to beat him.
Interesting.
So then the following week after that, there's a tag team match with Undertaker teaming up with Cena to go against Angle and Jericho. Cena manages to pin Jericho in that match, which leads to them having a big match at the pay-per-view, which is how they blow off big feuds. And Cena beats Jericho in that match as well.
That's really good. That's really effective.
So yeah, I think
sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a really good way to start, but I think I think they may have fumbled writing him a little bit after that, because they start him off really strong against two like big names and like have him like actively participating in storylines, but they kind of have him fall down the card a little bit to kind of compete just against like mid-level people or low to mid-level. They have him cut a promo against the wrestler Test, who's what at one point was like, oh, he's big and scary, but now he was kind of like, he's just one of the many like big guys who was intimidating, and the promo doesn't even make sense. He just says that Test looks like a chipmunk. It's weird.
Okay.
Cena wins with a roll-up, which is when you go up behind him and just spin him over real fast. Usually that's like a surprise way to get a pin, so that's a way to pull off like an upset in storyline. Then he has a match against Rico, and I don't know how to best describe Rico's character, but Rico, it makes sense to have him against Rico because they had they worked together in the developmental territory, so they knew how to work with each other. But in terms of just like where Rico was on the card, Rico is very impressive in matches, but his character was very much a comedy character. That he was like, he originally started as being like the stylist of one of the wrestlers.
Okay.
And then like he got into like matches and stuff after that. It's weird. But so basically their match starts because Cena would change the color of his neon trunks every like week. So and then Rico like made fun of him for it, and that's how their match started.
That's like the most. That's not a thing to make fun of. It like I would change my costume up like constantly probably.
But then
that's just me. Right?
Yeah. Then after that, so I mentioned that there were two different shows at this time. There was Raw and Smackdown. They're supposed to be kind of on equal, but how fans generally see it in terms of how writing and booking is and how they get treated. Many consider Raw the A show where all the big name talents are, and SmackDown is the B show, where it's kind of less important. But then at that time there were also two other shows, Velocity and Heat, and I would describe Heat as the C show and Velocity as the D show. After that, they kind of put Cena on Velocity for a bit.
Oh, jeez.
And Cena has said in interviews around this point, they were basically saying, like, we don't know how much longer we're going to keep you around.
Isn't Cena one of the people you were saying, when he's asked about stories he wanted to do or stuff he wanted to do, he just won't talk about it because he couldn't get Vince didn't want to go with the stuff that he pitched?
Yeah, all he says, he doesn't give much clues, he just says, control the controllable.
Okay. I mean, this sounds like that sounds like it's tied into this a little bit.
Yeah, so... Huh. What really turned it around is on the Halloween episode, he was dressed as Vanilla Ice, and in a backstage promo, he did a freestyle rap hitting on Stephanie McMahon.
Oh no.
And someone saw that and was like, wait, you can freestyle? And he was like, yeah. So they were like, okay, that's going to be your character now. This is your last chance.
Excuse me?
So he picked up a character that is just referred to unironically as the Doctor of Thugonomics. And what he does is he goes down to the ring, and while he's coming down, he freestyles on his opponent.
Of course he does. God, I don't know where I want to start with that. God. I feel as though, outside of the podcast, I've registered my general disdain for white rappers. I'm willing to give many of them a chance, and many of them have impressed me, but, growing up with, mixed and black, I have listened to and appreciated a lot of rap and hip-hop, and it's a genre that, black people have made it what it is and made it to begin with, and it's hard for me to find white rappers that I think can ever really rival them, so I always sound more, I don't want to say scornful, I may sound more dismissive than I mean to.
That's fair. Cena is I wouldn't say he's bad.
Okay, I'm wondering now. Is he good? Is he good at all?
So I'm going to show you in the Watch Together room, and I'll just cut the in between out in the actual upload of one of his raps, where he freestyles on Brock Lesnar, a man who looks like a brick wall, decided to wrestle.
I do remember Lester's name. Okay.
Yep. So I have it up. Just let me know when you're ready for me to hit play.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
There's a moment in there where Cena ends a line with ability, and then you can kind of see him shit, how do I rhyme my way out of this? And he has to go for finish me, and it's like, all right. Nice recovery. Oh my god. I'm glad, that they let John Cena rap.
So, initially on this run, he's the bad guy, very obviously from being booed. But eventually, over time, people, started, liking the fact that he does that. Also just because it's kind of reminiscent of the Attitude Era, where they're just dicks.
Yeah.
And eventually he does perform his own theme songs. His first theme song, I think, is probably lyrically the best. Because I'll just read it out as rhythmically as I can without the beat behind it.
Oh yes.
Whether fighting or spitting, my discipline is unforgiving. Got you backing up in a defensive position. An ass-kicking anthem. Heavyweight or bantam. Holding camps for ransom. The microphone phantom. Teams hit the floor. It's the new fight joint. Like a broken needle, kid, you missing the point. We dominate your conference with offense. That's no nonsense. My theme song hits. Get your reinforcements. We strike quick with hard kicks. Ducking nightsticks. Bare knuckle men fight through... I fucked up the line, but... The line that I fucked up is, bare knuckle men through fight pits, beat you lifeless, never survive this, forget you like Alzheimer's, two-faced rappers walk away with four signers, at the raw rhymer, turning legends to old timers, my insides is like a viper biting through your one-liners, new Dead Man Inc., and we about to make you famous, taking over Earth and still kicking in your anus.
That is pretty solid, actually.
So, he told the story that he would spend most of the pre-show kind of like trying to think of things to do on it. And that's where, because most people would be practicing the match, but it is like, oh, in order for me to like perform solidly on the show, I gotta spend all day on this.
Yeah.
So eventually he does turn to a good guy because people like that. And he kind of, I don't know how best to, because like I said in a previous episode, Vince knows somewhere deep down what's wrong with the world, which is why like all of like the big like good guys are kind of like representative of like the voice of like the common person. So like Stone Cold Steve Austin, for one, he's very much like the antithesis of what McMahon was, where McMahon was like, oh, snotty businessman, but Austin was just like a normal person who would drink beer and had a short temper.
Yeah.
So like kind of like a just a way to like a power fantasy, I guess. People could see themselves in the Austin role. So Cena eventually becomes WWE champion, where he's feuding with a wrestler named John Bradshaw Layfield, who at that point had written a book in real life on like stocks and became kind of rich from it. And he was originally a cowboy character. He was the bearded one in the APA, the always pounding ass. But they changed him to a racist billionaire just when that came out.
I wish that wasn't like a classic archetype, but let's be real, it absolutely is.
Yeah. He's definitely performed some there's definitely some things you look back and it's like, this is like offensive, but it's still topical, especially if he's like the bad guy. Because there was an extended segment where he was supposed to be like looking by south of the border for illegal immigrants, and that's when he was feuding with Eddie Guerrero. So it was definitely like racially coded tension.
Jeez.
The funniest thing about that is that they wandered onto the wrong farmland while recording that and got a gun pulled on them, which is my favorite thing about that.
Good.
But yeah, they definitely like made Cena like the voice of the common person in that storyline, where he's like, the world you're from, when he's talking to JBL, is different than the world, and then he points like around to the crowd, the world we're from. So that's what kind of made him like established there. Eventually, Cena actually got to record a whole rap album at one point, which has surprisingly good production.
I was hoping you would say that at some point, because now I have to go find it.
Yeah, there are parts of some songs and some cut songs that are like, no, this is actually really good. He was featured on another song. I'm seeing because it's someone who works with Tech Nine a lot. Murs. He did a song with Murs called Hustle.
Okay.
And he also, in 2015, he did 2 songs with Wiz Khalifa, too. So.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So, he hasn't done, like, rap stuff in a while, but, like, that was, like, central to his character, and it's just something they, like, slowly phased out over time. It's still his theme song, is him rapping his theme song, which also led me to believe that all wrestlers sing their own theme songs.
I wish.
Because sometimes they pick songs and you don't hear them talk a lot, so you're like, I could reasonably believe they're singing that.
Oh my gosh. No, that makes sense though. Like I think I probably would assume the same thing, that they at least if they didn't perform it, that they like composed or had some kind of influence in their entrance music. At the very least, I would assume you choose it and some of it. So I think that logic tracks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, when I was very little, I thought Triple H performed his own song, but it's the band Motorhead. So no.
Yeah, there's only one H in Motorhead. It took you a second, huh?
God. My brain did not catch up with that.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So, just from that, like, Cena eventually just became, like, the household name he is today, where he's the person who's performed the most Make-A-Wish wishes out of any celebrity.
God, that's right.
So, and, like, now he's going to be in The Suicide Squad, coming to HBO Max this summer, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's the week after my birthdays, as I recall. I think it's either the week before or the week after. I think it might be August 6th. Which would be a week before my birthday. Which is why I'm extremely excited, because if I get, not to totally derail, but I mean, if I get another good theatrical Harley Quinn movie that's in theaters, well, I'm not going to see it in theaters, obviously. I'm going to watch it on HBO Max. But, like, another good Harley Quinn movie, I'm going to be so happy. It is August 6th, so it's a week before my birthday. It'll be either a good early birthday present, or it will ruin my birthday.
I should bill Warner Brothers for this plug.
You should.
Yeah, like, and then Cena's also getting his own TV series based off of his character in Suicide Squad, too.
Yeah. So. Warner Brothers, call us, seriously.
Did you also, this is, again, I know we're just on a Warner Brothers tangent, but
yeah.
Did you see what Batista did at the Warner Brothers offices?
No, what did he do?
So he's in Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead movie. And I think that's partially working with Warner Brothers in some way. So he called a meeting at Warner Brothers, and he was like, "I'm playing Bane," and they're like, "We're not even casting for Bane right now." And he's like, "You misunderstand me. I'm playing Bane."
Yeah, no, of course you're not casting for Bane, because I am playing him. The casting is over. I kind of admire that, though. Like, you've got to shoot your shot, and if anybody is going to do that, I think he deserves a shot at Bane.
I need Peacemaker to fight Bane.
Holy shit. Happens. I mean, I would be down. Okay.
It's just, that's also just from what I'm sure I've told you, that's literally the how to pitch things to Vince McMahon method.
Yeah, you were saying.
We're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
You misunderstand me. We're doing this.
I can only imagine that Vince. I don't know. I don't know how much he pays attention to other industry stuff now I think about it, but I imagine he found that at least a little amusing. That Batista just went in and was like, okay, here's what we're doing. I feel like with him not liking yes men, according to him, or according to others around him, or I feel like some part of him would at least approve a little bit.
Vince is actually very salty about how Batista's career has went, from what I've heard.
Of course he is. How could I be so naive with Vince?
Because Batista wanted to be in movies. Like he was one of the biggest stars, but they were either casting John in movies or just or legacy stars, like just plenty of different ones.
Yeah.
Batista is, I wouldn't say he's like as like quote unquote conventionally attractive and like a Hollywood way, which I think is what they were casting movies based on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still think he's an attractive person, but I can see why like Vince's like cold corporate nature would be like, no, you can't be in it.
Yeah, I would assume he's a good looking guy. I think objectively he appears to possess handsomeness. I'm not a great judge, as you know, but he's got the comedic timing. Like I don't know if he was in anything before he was in Guardians, but he has established himself as being an incredibly talented comedic actor. So like it does. Vince, they don't have to be conventionally attractive. Just let them do their thing.
He was like, I believe the exact thing that led him to eventually just leaving WWE was like, well, I want to do this movie. And they were like, no. Or they were like, oh, well, think about it. And he just got fed up with it and he left. And then later he did Guardians.
Good for him. I'm sorry, I feel like I've derailed us terribly.
No, I mean, like, I did mention earlier that Batista did also debut this same episode.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to share what his initial gimmick was with you. So, I mentioned the Dudley Boys in a previous episode, and I'll just send you a picture of the both of them.
If they made Batista another Love Machine character with, like, a robe and stuff, I'm leaving.
No, it's weird. So, if Discord wants to send it, this is the Dudley Boys. They're in canon brothers.
Yes, perfect. Okay, good. I love this already.
So there's really three of them. There's a short one named Spike that's also involved. But when they did the brand split to split Raw and SmackDown into different groups of wrestlers, so they wouldn't always have to be traveling multiple times a week to get to different locations. Vince tried to make a bunch of solo acts out of different tag teams, and he wanted to make Devon a solo act, and he's the one on the right. They made Devon a character named Reverend Devon, who is a pastor.
Okay.
And before matches, he would perform little miniature sermons.
Oh my god.
So I'm just gonna send you a picture of him performing one of his sermons.
Did he freestyle them like Cena does his raps?
No, he would just do the sermon, just like a real ass sermon, but like also have it aimed at his opponent. What Batista is that what he debuted as in the episode is that he was the person in charge of the collections plate. So he wore a suit with ripped off sleeves as he wore the collections box around his neck with a chain. And while Devon performed his sermon, he walked around the ring, like going to people being like, like, put money in.
Yeah, just like at some of the mega churches that I've that people I know have gone to. Oh my god. A
great picture of him.
Thank goodness.
Showed up.
That is so much better than what I was envisioning.
So, I know we have to do a whole episode on vampires, but this one won't get touched on because it did not occur in WWE. It occurred off television. Batista, before debuting in the developmental territory, played a pseudo-vampire character named Leviathan.
Okay, more Bible theme. So he was like half vampire, or?
So he has like the sharp teeth and like red eyes, but he's got like big chain and like a cross or a crucifix around his neck.
He does.
So I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, very intrigued by the vampire lore implications of this design. I have many questions.
It's very odd.
It's a choice.
So, because we got super off topic, I do want to bring it back to the Mountain Goats album, which is an album I'm not 100% finished listening to. I'm through 90% of it. I have like 4 songs left.
Okay.
But I just want to say how much it appeals to me as someone who like is nostalgic for wrestling. Like just like certain verbiage they use in songs, like from the first song, the Southwestern Territory, where they mention like just how like they pitch the songs like set up as small screen July evening view. That like immediately reminded me of like how I spent a lot of summers with like the lights off and like just the wrestling is on the TV. And like it's definitely a love letter to wrestling.
Yeah.
And I did mention it to you off of the podcast. So the second song, Ballad of Chavo Guerrero, I thought was going to be about Chavo Guerrero Jr., who's the one that actually competed long term in WWE and is Eddie Guerrero's nephew. It's actually about that Chavo's father, who competed in WWE very briefly as Chavo Classic. But it really hits me in the place where kind of what like I emotionally felt for a lot of wrestlers, of them just kind of being like heroes in multiple ways. Like the weirdest thing is like it's exactly how I felt about Eddie Guerrero in terms of it. And again, I told you this story off podcast, but I want to let everyone else know about pretty much my favorite wrestling memory from when I was younger.
Yeah.
So when I was in elementary school, I went to my first show. It was Smackdown. And at that time, I had been rooting for Eddie Guerrero like long term. But even when he like turned heel against Rey Mysterio, I was still rooting for him. So he comes out and like he's getting booed heavily because his character has like gone to progressively darker and darker, like more evil places. Mm-hmm. But I'm like seated by the ramp, and as he passed me, and it like throughout everyone booing me, I leaned over, booing him. I leaned over the barricade and I yelled, "I still love you, Eddie!" And he turned and smiled at me.
Aww.
And that's like probably one of my favorite wrestling memories. And it's like so bittersweet, being that he passed away several months after that. Mm-hmm. And it's just something that's like eternally in my head, and it's definitely part of why I think so highly of wrestlers and of the art form in general. Because like seeing that little part behind it when I was very young, and seeing that like they are affected by like the crowd, and even though it may feel like good to get the desired reaction, hearing that someone still cared about them still made them smile.
Yeah.
There's also like plenty of other songs on this album that made me like this is like an album that loves wrestling.
Yes. Yeah, it really is.
The most surprising one that I was not expecting, because I wasn't looking at the song list as I was listening to it. Mm-hmm. Like, I would look back and look at names if I heard something that really was like, wait, what? Is the song Stabbed to Death Outside San Juan.
Yes, yeah.
So, this is about a wrestler we talked about last episode, the one that stopped selling Lex Luger's moves and Lex Luger had to leave the cage match.
That's right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was the wrestler Bruiser Brody. And what basically happened, I have to be careful about talking about this because no official verdict came to, so I don't want to be sued for defamation. But there have been documentaries that have made this.
Okay. We don't want to get sued the same episode that Warner Brothers decides to sponsor us, so yeah, we'll be careful.
Yeah, so I'm also just very clearly just quoting from the documentary investigations and stuff like that. If I make any specific like allegation or claim, this is just what I've heard. It's not, do not sue us.
Okay.
So Bruiser Brody was one of like very good like monster heels. That's like big, like scary bad guy. And was also legitimately tough as well. I'll just send a picture to you so you can see kind of what he looked like.
Okay.
So they was doing a round of shows in Puerto Rico, which again has its own specialized wrestling lore. Every area has its own different way wrestling works. basically what happened is after the show, I don't remember. There's a bunch of lead up to it, and it's hard to. They did an episode of the show, the documentary Dark Side of the Ring on this. If anyone wants to know like full stuff, and I'm just stuttering about this because I don't want to like misrepresent anything.
Yeah.
So again, this was in the 80s, so this was also like at the time where like probably a very high non-0% of people were sure wrestling was not a work, that it was like a real contest and the stories were real. So basically what happened was in that show in San Juan, after it, fellow wrestler and the booker of it, Jose Gonzalez, who other people might know as the wrestler Invader #1, was like, hey, Brody, come into the shower with me to talk about business. And it was like, and he was like, oh, okay, because he didn't think anything was wrong. In the shower, Brody got stabbed many times. Wrestler Tony Atlas says that he saw that Gonzalez was holding the knife. And so it seems like Gonzalez did it. Sometimes, some versions of it say, a lot of times when that was brought up, people thought Gonzalez might have been defending himself because, again, they thought Brody was legitimately a monster because he played this bad guy. Due to like the heavy traffic and the large crowd, the paramedics couldn't get him out, and he passed away pretty much as he showed up to the hospital. So there's plenty of witnesses to it that said like have different stories on it. Tony Atlas went to the police and was like basically like, oh yeah, like just let me know when the trial was and I will fly back. Because again, they have to keep working with just how wrestling is. And the trial wasn't going to be like for a very long time. He didn't get the letter to come to the trial until like 4 months after Jose Gonzalez was found not guilty.
Oh, jeez.
So some people think it was like something like it was like planned that it didn't go through because Jose Gonzalez was like kind of like a national hero on top of that, and a lot of people did think like, oh well, he's the good guy, he would never do something like that.
Yeah.
So it was. So this song is clear to me that it's not just like loves wrestling as what wrestling is intended to be, just like everything about it, and it's interested in the ins and outs of it, even the tragedies and stuff like that. It's a very good album. I think probably anyone should listen to it, even if you're not a wrestling fan, just to like, because it's able to share these narratives that have happened in wrestling in very interesting ways.
Yeah, when I got into this album, I actually didn't know the Mountain Goats had been releasing new stuff. It was a couple of years. I think it was like a year after it came out or something. And I stumbled across it online, and I was so excited for New Mountain Goats because they were the band that really got me through college. And you know how there's bands that kind of get you through really rough parts of your life? The Mountain Goats was that band for me. And so, yeah, absolutely. They're the band that got me through a lot of stuff. And so I remember just listening to this album song by song, and because it had been out for a while, there were like, I don't remember where I was reading it from, but I was reading like there was a webpage, it might have just been the Wikipedia article, I'm not even sure anymore, that was explaining like what these songs were referencing and what concepts it was talking about. And I don't have all that memorized, not all of that memory still in my brain, but it was enough that like it painted this picture of wrestling and lucha libre, and it gave me this idea of what wrestling could mean to people. And I've always really appreciated that. And I'm glad that I remembered to mention it to you because like I told you this off of the podcast. The thing that I really enjoy is how highly you think of wrestlers in wrestling, because it never comes off like you're mocking the entire concept and you're just, hate watching something or watching something that's so bad it's good. It's always been really clear to me how much you love and enjoy it, and how, like, it feels like you're sharing it with me and, like, inviting me to learn about it and enjoy it too. And this album, I think, encapsulates that really well. Like you were saying, it introduces these ideas and it introduces these stories, and it paints this picture and gives you this idea that there were, like, these, not historical necessarily, but these major events that were happening, these concepts that are bigger and deeper than the spectacle. And so I think it's a really cool, I don't think coalition is a word, coalescence of what we're kind of trying to do here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a lot of rambling just to say that I have a lot of fun with this, and I'm glad you like this album.
No, I mean, like, that was much more organized than me trying to talk about what happened to Bruiser Brody. Because most of the terrible things, unless it's like a terrible thing that I personally lived through in wrestling, I don't have much of the beat for beats committed to memory. I try to forget the terrible things that I don't actively were part of.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you.
It's just a really good album. I don't know.
Yeah. Highly recommended. What's the other one? If you just want, like, angry, depressed, upset mountain goats, Tallahassee is the album that their angriest and most famous song, No Children, is on. And if you want the specific album that got me through some stuff, Tallahassee for No Children, and The Sunset Tree is the album that has This Year on it, which is a song that I listen to at the beginning of every new year. Yeah, so that's my music recommendation in the middle of our wrestling podcast.
I mean, we also sidetracked talking about DC superhero comics for a while.
That's true.
I probably could have used that as a side to talk about a certain wrestling gimmick that I've been trying to talk about, but that's going to be saved for a different episode.
Okay.
I am sad I can't recommend you a better set of music, but I'm linking you John Cena's album.
Oh, thank God. Oh, that's right. The Time Is Now is the name of his theme song. He did perform that.
Yeah.
I meant to ask you, because I was like, does that mean the music from the John Cena meme is literally music he raps over?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I forgot there's 2 songs featuring Bumpy Knuckles on this album. No, there's 3 songs. I forgot that he's on this album that much.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to listen to this.
So, just for additional context, the second one is, I think it's his cousin, who's just full-time rapper. So he's good too. I think he's a little more, like, studies different, like, rhyme schemes and stuff, not as much as Cena, because Cena also has to remember how to do moves without breaking people. So
yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else to talk about, because it feels like we talked about a whole lot in a very short time.
We did. Well, and we have an extra 10 minutes at the beginning because we introduced the match too. So we are at almost about time if we're just out, because I think we covered a lot of ground, a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next episode, and it's gonna be just me talking about a wrestler that I really love, Mick Foley, who came up last episode several times. And it's going to get crazy. And Daphne will wonder, why would someone keep doing this if all of this happened in succession?
Oh, I can't wait. That's gonna be fun. Hell yes, I'm excited.
Alright. Join us next time on Lore of the Ring. Bye.
Bye.